multiple multiple people who I have never fucking heard of have made it clear that it's either them and their music or Joe Rogan is basically off the platform because of spreading of misinformation, which is a loose term that doesn't mean anything. Now, there's going to be enough people already discussing what is actually happening. Long story short, you had Neil Young and other guys who have said they don't want any part of that, and now they're gaslighting people into, their followers are gaslighting people, and, oh, well, you're not supportive. Even Barry Manilow situation. Y'all heard about that? It was a lie altogether. And then the motherfucker Barry Manilow comes out and was like, yeah, no, I never said that I was going to be doing that. And then they're like, the followers are like, oh, so you support misinformation. Like, what? So this is what I'm talking about, okay? And this is the angle that I want to speak on. You can look more into it. Looks like Spotify may end up actually bending the knee. They have, I believe, come out and said that they're rolling out some new restrictions that are pertaining to, this was as of yesterday, that are pertaining to like doubling down on some of these rules and potentially getting people out of there. Now, of course, we know this is in response to the everybody in the music industry essentially saying, definitely their followers, that this is what you must do. Now, this is the angle that I'm going to take since you know what's happened out of this. And bear with me because I need you to understand this. For those of you that listened to me before, this is going to be just me repeating or reiterating some of the things that I've said before, but it is such an important thing if we're going to ever find a victory. What you're seeing right now is just, as I've said before, and that is that the left, the authoritarian left, controls the entire conversation. And the entertainers that have been rolled out are on their side and in their pockets one way or another. Now, you as a person that may value liberty, no matter what it is you call yourself, may think that they're stupid. You heard like shut up and dribble and all of that before, but the reality is that those people are influential. So for years and decades, one of my biggest criticisms of the people that value liberty and non-leftists is that they have had no cultural imprint for a couple of different reasons. They always look at the resort, unfortunately, and they say, well, they're keeping us out. And to that, I would say that is not necessarily the case. The problem is two main things as far as why you're losing to them. One being is that for a very long time, you neglected the importance of this. A lot of folks said, well, yeah, that we have the best ideas on our side. We're the smartest people. We have all the think tanks, and we just be cordial and all that, respectful to our enemies, and we're going to win. You found out that was a failed strategy. And long-term game of leftists were to infiltrate these cultural, iconic things. And now they have control of it all, which is why, despite them being objectively wrong on so many other things, they don't even have to properly explain themselves, but they control it, which is just as good enough to having and basically obtaining and sustaining that power that it is they have. But there's another part of that. The difference is, and this is the biggest difference as far as if you wanted to change the tide today. So these cultural representatives that are out there that are not leftists like myself and musicians and that, are out there, a few of us that are out there. A big part of it is that unlike the left, the non-leftists are hell bent on supporting the folks that hate them like a lot. And you know how I talk about the perceived legitimacy? I always use that term, perceived legitimacy, because it's not actually legit. Which I guess that's all legitimacy means anyway. It's that how people see that figure, that thing, that cultural thing. And they have conservatives have this probably the worst of the like non-leftist groups, in that they look to these things and they say, well, those are the legitimate ones, right? They don't even half the time give other stuff the time of day, but that's the legitimate thing. It's pop culture. That's pop culture, whether it be in certain sports or whatever it is. That's legitimate. And they look at that and they will fund that despite them dropping nuggets, or rather the controllers saying that we really don't like you. And if people in our space have your positions, we're going to get them out. The only acceptable position it is to have publicly and not have to be ostracized or completely kicked out of this subculture would be being an authoritarian leftist. Nobody is going to lose their job now because they said Black Lives Matter. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But this is where we're at. I say all the time that the leftists don't reciprocate that. They never will either, but they don't reciprocate. Leftists have identified that they don't like you, they will not fund you. A lot of them pissy broke anyway, but they don't fund you. That speaks to my point. And that a lot of these institutions that people look at as like big and things that we need to look to for our sources of entertainment, particularly in the entertainment space, are only there because the opposite side will continue to throw fucking funds at them and give them the benefit of the doubt. And this is why the approach has been so nonsensical, because often you hear, like, I ridicule these people. I want them completely delegitimized. I'd rather compete and then delegitimize. I can have two firing fucking brain cells so I can do two things at the same time. I'd rather compete and then delegitimize them, make fun of them, ridicule, mock, shame, all those tactics. And you get people like me that use that, and there'll be some chicken shit conservative, right? Who's like, well, we don't want to be like them. We're better than that. Shut the fuck up. Quit trying to project. Quit trying to project your own individual ethics and set of morals or principles that your enemy does not share. So you reaching across the aisle. They don't give a fuck about that. They will never reciprocate that. They want you out, and they will never defend you in the event that you get ostracized. They're not going to come to your defense ever. They're never going to do that. But they depend on you not looking to other things that may be in the same subculture as just as legitimate. The reason I say this, once that happens, this tide changes. This is why I'm so optimistic. As much as I talk, and if, sometimes it feels like I can be a downer, and it's not the case. I just want you to understand the reality. But just as quick as it got bad, it can get better. And the minute that non-leftists sit and look at the subcultures that exist right now, I'm going to say, you know what? No more, bro. You've made it abundantly clear that you don't like us. Okay, bet. We're just simply not going to subsidize you anymore. We're not. And maybe there's a competitor who doesn't fucking hate you that may be in a similar space, right? And can replace that. And this is why the creators and the investors and all those guys who are not deranged leftists should seek each other out. And just as much as, for example, you look at legitimacy through these guys, DC or Marvel, Disney or whatever, look at the other guy that's trying to do something else in the same subculture as just as legitimate if it's good, not just for the sake of supporting an alternative that's not even well packaged and it's dog shit. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about good alternatives. That's when the tide changes. That's when the pendulum swings. It doesn't require you to be a hypocrite or contradict your principles or anything like that. But you have, no matter, I think the biggest part of that and the biggest issue is that so many folks look to their enemies and they say, well, okay, you're like me. What you value is what I value. Your set of ethics is the same as me. And that's why you lose, because you're projecting something on them and they often use it against you all the time. Well, this guy who made a post yesterday talking about how much Jesus, he hates your religion, how much Jesus is all of that. They don't like him. And then they'll turn around and try to use your Christianity against you when you do something they don't like. These are evil people. And they'll never reciprocate. I'm all about reciprocity. You come at me correct, I come at you correct. Simple as that. I don't care where you're at. But once I already know your intentions are bad and I know you want me fucking gone, I'm going to adjust accordingly. I'm under no requirement to sit up around and allow you to beat me over the head. So you wonder why we keep running back to this. Every time we keep doing it. It's like, yeah, big mega corporate entity that may have not, they grew because they were not opposed to having, it was the old Michael Jordan, hey, Republicans wear sneakers too. But that's no longer the case. And the brands that you guys know and love are just, they're controlled by the authoritarian left. How they got there, we've discussed. I just kind of gave you a little tidbit about that. But look, whether you agree with that or disagree is irrelevant because we're where we're at. Now, what are we going to do? Are we going to keep allowing them to win by simply depending on the money that they get? I mean, you can't control everything. You can't control everything. But what you can do is say, you know what? No more. Fuck y'all. Y'all saying fuck me. Every time, like we're talking about on Spotify right now, you can get a lot of fucked up people's shit. You know what I mean? We know, like the likes of Chris Brown whooping up on fucking Whammon, R. Kelly and his issues, right? All these other people that had domestic issues, violence, and histories of it that have their music and or podcasts on Spotify. That didn't do it, right? Sex trafficking, that didn't do it. What did it was having some people on that were qualified, by the way, to speak on the subject because they were doctors, scientists, come to a conclusion that was different from you. It wasn't, just fucking fall over yourself and get the jab. They wasn't shilling a jab. And that's heresy to them. That's all it took. That's heresy. You can't do that. And they will get all their subjects to try to whip Spotify into shape. That goes to show how powerful it is that they are, no matter how stupid you think that person is or those groups of people are. I don't even know half these motherfuckers. I have no idea who some of these guys are. I'm not going to let my own ignorance on who they are change their influence. But what that speaks to is where it is that we are at. Culturally, subculturally, things that are not necessarily directly attached to politics may have some loose connections, but it's not political per se. You just have no cultural imprint if you are a non-leftist. That needs to change, man. If you want to get a victory, that needs to change. And that's going to require a lot of you guys to drop a lot of brands. And I'm not talking about brands that are neutral, bro. I'm talking about brands that have made it clear they fucking hate you. Not because there's a disagreement. That's inevitable. I'm talking about where the handlers have made it clear that they don't fucking like you, man. They depend on your money, but they don't like you. That's who I'm discussing. Those guys need to be dropped. And once that happens en masse, instead of sitting here begging these fucking authoritarian leftists to change, right? Why are you keeping us out of your projects? You need to change. And then you give them the benefit of the doubt, and they'll jangle some little keys, and you get all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed and shit, and you go give them the time of day again after they've already made it abundantly clear that they hate you. That has to stop. If you want to win, that's where it's at. And so all those guys that have placed their entire well-being in the future, and themselves and their family on politics, you need to focus more on culture. Look how the left has operated and look how they win. It has nothing to do with having the best ideas on their side. It's just a matter of existing in things that are influential. And the minute that approach is adopted by folks that give a fuck about liberty, liberty will then win. A lot of these mega corporate entities only have positions right now because they think it's going to be lucrative going into the future. So how about this? Instead of adjusting based upon what they do, we start to create our own shit. And if that means having a parallel economy, it is what it is. But we do not have to sit up here and take this constant ostracism and this constant beating us over the head and keeping you out on top of that because you don't have a position it is that they like. That has to stop. And again, that's going to require you guys to look in the mirror. Everybody can do better. I can do better in this aspect. And then we'll start to win. The tide will change, and it can change. This isn't a black pill. It can change. Just as they are aware of where their money goes, you have to be aware of where your money fucking goes. Simple as that. And you can't do it with every single thing, but I'm willing to bet there's some sort of entertainment that you constantly look to as legitimate, even though they made it clear that your views are simply not acceptable among them.